Hi, so I'm Eric Savitz. I'm a partner with Brunswick Group, and I am a reformed journalist. Once upon a time, I'd be sitting on that side of the panel. I'm going to let my fellow panelists introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll jump in. So why don't you go first, Ian?
Sure. So I'm Ian Sherr. I'm the executive editor at CNET News. I basically run news operations on the West Coast.
And I'm Mark Costa. I write for Venture Capital Journal, which covers the venture capital business, but I've written about technology and business for 2 decades and worked in newspapers before that.
I'm Scott Mace. I'm the senior technology editor for a magazine called Health Leaders, which is for healthcare executives, large practices, hospitals, large health systems, and payers. And I've been covering technology in Silicon Valley for more than 30 years.
And I'm Owen Linderholm. I'm the editor of Yahoo Small Business, and that's all I'll say.
Wow, that was good. You guys followed directions. That's impressive. So I'm going to put on my pretend entrepreneur hat and ask you the question that everyone here would want to ask you, which is, I've got a great startup. We're working on something super cool. How do I get it into your publication? How do I get into, Ian, how do I get into CNET?
So for us, we're probably the last place you're going to stop because a lot of what we're doing these days is actually trying to write about the industry trends. We're trying to explain technology a lot to the people in Peoria, Illinois, and into St. Louis, Missouri. So for us, the startups that are starting to catch real steam, those are the people that we tend to write about. But otherwise, your startups are more interesting to us as part of larger industry trends. And so getting our attention means being able to catch, okay, here's a big trend going on, talk to one of our reporters, usually our startup reporter or someone who's on the correct beat, and actually say, hey, we have some perspective on this trend that we can offer. But if it's about your individual startup, we're less interested at the moment.
So be an example of a bigger thing.
Yeah, to be a big example. And also, you need to catch us at the right time when we're writing the right story. So for example, we have a sharing economy reporter. Her name's Derek Kerr. And I had her write recently, about a couple months ago, about how you could pretty much get anything delivered to you, like cats. And you could get like a haircut. And it's a joke, but actually there are startups who do this. And so we wrote a whole story about this. And that was a moment where you could jump in if you're the correct startup. And so how do you do that, right? How do you know we're writing something? We're not broadcasting it. So oftentimes it's about the relationship, right? You have either someone who you have in media relations, someone who's doing PR for you or whatever, who has a good relationship with me, who knows how to get my attention, or you just catch us at the right time, and it's really an issue of luck, right? But when you're small, it's really hard, especially with someone like us who's not focused on the small startup world.
I have to underscore your 2 big points. A, you're more interesting to us as part of a bigger trend story. So to the extent that you can pitch a bigger trend story, as with you as an example, that helps. Obviously, it's a matter of timing, too. If we happen to be involved in a story about fintech and you're doing a financial startup, you're a natural match. And on top of that, let me offer 2 suggestions as well. Know the publication that you're pitching. I can't tell you how many pitches I get from companies that want to tell me about a new product that is just being launched. Well, we are a site, and I work for Venture Capital Journal, and I also work for PE Hub, so I'm thinking PE Hub now. We're a site that covers venture funding. So when you come to us with a new product announcement, it just doesn't click with us. It's not something we typically cover. Now, the challenge for you guys is how do you know it's the right time to get in touch with us? Or how do you, tell us that you're available to talk about fintech, for instance? And I recommend highly staying in touch with the journalist with a monthly email that might update your clients, or send an email from time to time. Hey, I've got these 2 people who are really involved in this industry. If you're involved, if you're doing a story on that topic, think of these people. Do that kind of stuff on a regular basis, and you're more top of mind for us.
Scott, I've got a great healthcare startup. You want to write about me?
Well, I'd actually echo the comment made about trends. I certainly take a more analytical view and not so much a breaking news view of what's happening in healthcare technology. Having said that, if you can bring to me a physician or a patient champion, someone who doesn't have a financial interest in the company, they may have the interest of their time and their attention and what's going on, but that can count for a lot. Also in healthcare, you have to remember that if you're doing a medical device and you've got FDA issues, if you don't have your FDA clearance yet, it's not going to be considered a serious contender for use in a clinical setting, at least not right away. And there can be some pre-approval trials that are going on.
But I have
following a
really,
number of
really
things
good
like that.
stage 1 data, though.
What's that?
I had really good phase 1 data. You don't want to write about my job.
Yeah, I shy away from trying to make a decision based on me looking at the data and going, oh yes, it shows this. I'm going to look for that physician champion particularly to go, this is why you should be writing about this.
Owen, are you going to write about my startup?
The health technology one, absolutely not, because you haven't told me anything that's of interest to me at all. So I'm a little different from the other guys because we actually cover startups. So among, Yahoo Small Business, in our mind, early stage startups are small businesses too. You're all hoping to become big businesses, which is great, but at some point you're small businesses as well. And a lot of what our audience wants to hear are things like what challenges other entrepreneurs faced and how they overcame them. And that's a story, and that's not anything to do with your product, and I'm afraid that that's not always something people want to hear, but that's the way it is. I'm not interested in products at all. But that doesn't mean you can't be really useful and a really useful resource. One of the things that we're always looking for are people who can comment on changes and trends and things that are going on. I mean, the Title III equity crowdfunding stuff is breaking loose very soon. I'm going to want to talk to anybody who's at any startup who's trying to make use of that in any way at some point very soon, because we want to know what's really going to happen. And no one really knows the answer to that right now. So there's always opportunities, and one of the things I always tell people who ask me about that is, just think about it from the point of view of the audience and who you're talking to, and think about what you have to offer them. It's not about selling what you're doing, it's about what you can offer them. Once you've established that level of trust, then people are going to be prepared to listen to what you have to say about your product and what you're doing.
Well, go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say, Owen raises a great point, and I find that PR and marketing people often have a hard time conceiving what a story is from the perspective of a journalist. I mean, I'm sure you find that as well. What is a story? And I'm not sure I know a great way of defining what is a story or not. I could probably give a few examples. You guys might have some thoughts on this as well. What is a story?
I think, just as someone who helps people generate ideas, and I think a lot of people have trouble finding out what a story is just generally. I mean, even in the news industry, like a lot of the people who are still learning their jobs in the craft have a lot of hard time learning how to craft a pitch to me, right? Because my writers pitch me, right? You're not just pitching them. And so the struggle that a lot of people have is figuring out, okay, what's the publication I'm working for? What are they looking for? What do they want, right? And then how do I write it in a way that's going to be interesting to my editor, right? And those are hard things. And so learning yourselves a little bit about what we do, right? And reading what we write. I mean, I can't count how many times I have kept myself from saying, do you even read CNET? But honestly, like doing that will do so much for you, figuring out kind of where we sit and what we're doing. I mean, one of the biggest things I struggle with sometimes is that there are companies that pitch me on, 2.35 release about, with this extra blobdy-blob that does now. Oh my God, please write. And it's like, come on, let's be serious here, right? I'm not your advertising firm. I'm not doing your PR. I look at the types of stories we're writing. We don't do that. So how do you fit into the larger kind of scheme of what we're doing? That's really important. And if you're not thinking about that, you're going to totally miss the mark.
Right, I think you need a hook, right? So you need an excuse. People need an excuse to say yes. Here, let's do a quick survey on the panel. How many emails do you get a day?
I'm bordering on 500.
Mark?
Probably not that many, 150, 200.
Scott?
500.
About 500.
Okay, 500 emails a day. You're probably not going to read them all in any great detail, right?
Right.
So unless maybe you have nothing else to do. But probably you do, or you wouldn't be getting 500 emails a day. So, so you need some way for that story to stand out. It could be you need a hook. Now, the tricky part is to find a hook that really is a hook.
Yeah.
So the hook could be something about you're playing off a trend, which we talked about a little bit. It could be something about one of the founders has like an amazing story. Maybe they've done this before, which if you haven't done it before, it doesn't help you, but,
Right.
But nonetheless. It could be about who the investors are. It could be about some element of the structure of your business that's new. But you need, you need a gimmick.
Well, and I think the security startups have figured this out pretty well. They know that the best way to get my attention is that whatever latest hack has happened, they're like, we have an idea about why this happened, we have a comment. Even though I'm not really interested in what they have to offer, I do keep track of the people who are sending me those notes, and every once in a while I reach out back to them if I need an expert for a trend story. So there are some people who have figured this out sometimes, and that's the security industry. There's constant news in security, right? But a lot of people tend to piggyback on the news. And as long as you're reasonable about what you're expecting, like if we just published yesterday a whole story about revenge porn in the internet. It's a terrible thing, right? And how Facebook and Twitter are trying to fight against it. So we published that story, right? If you pitch me today about your technology to take care of that, guess what? I wrote about that already. But you might at least get my attention for the next time I'm going to write about that trend, or there might be something else that I'm interested in. So it always depends.
I can't tell you how many times I still get pitches on Valentine's Day for the Valentine's Day story I'm supposedly doing. I don't think I've
Wait, you're
ever
not writing
written-
one?
Yeah. But, as Eric says, there has to be a hook, and often that's some sense of controversy or some sense of drama. What is compelling about this? I do get a lot of pitches, and I actually brought an example of a couple things that I thought were good in terms of press releases and information disclosure, and a couple things that are bad. And this is a pitch, something along this line, adjusted a little to keep the name of the company out of it. But so here's a pitch on cloud management as a complex challenge because of multiple cloud computing architectures and customer demands and incompatible technologies and hybrid clouds. You should write a story on the challenges of cloud management and how companies can solve them. This is a pitch from a cloud management company. I mean,
Please do our
not-
PR.
Yeah, this is not hit.
Yeah, I think that it's a fundamental problem, is how to be interesting. It's also related to this other fundamental problem, which, as a group, getting thousands of emails a day, maybe emails are not the best way to get to you. So I'd ask that each of you talk a little bit about what is the best route to actually get your attention. Do you want to take phone calls? Is it better if you get a reference? Talk a little bit about what works to get your attention.
Do you want to start over there?
Yeah, so I actually read all my 500 emails. I don't read them very well. I mean, I open the email and it's closed again in half a second because that was obviously a waste of time. So email works fine with me. Phone is okay, but actually the thing that works the best is a personal connection. And that's a little secret. It can be a PR person, but it's much more likely that look around and find somebody who knows me, who's prepared to say, you actually should talk to these guys. That will always get my attention. And then in terms of the other point about stories, one of the secrets is making it personal. People like stories about people, which means don't tell a story about a cloud management system. Tell a story about how a cloud management system saved a hospital from closing something which saved someone's life. It's pretty straightforward in some senses.
I can echo that. I wrote about a electronic health record that runs on the iPad called Modernizing Medicine. And they had sent me all kinds of emails, which I had not opened or had just quickly closed. And then I found someone who was like a champion for them, happened in this case to be a patient, and opened my eyes that I really should be going and checking these folks out. So I folded them into a story that's coming out on usability of electronic health records, which is a very important story in the industry right now. But it was the fact that this trusted friend of mine, source of mine, brought it to my attention, really cut through all the emails they're trying to send me to get me to pay attention to them.
You know, email is the best way, I think, to get in touch with me. Certainly not a phone call these days. We just don't have time for it. I don't read all my emails. I can't possibly. And so here are a couple tips on what I look for or how you get my attention. And before I get there, I will say personal connection can be important too. You build up relationships with people, whether they're PR people or company representatives, and that personal connection means something, for sure. It's like a recommendation from somebody you know. But more than that, when you send an email, a lot of times you guys are trying to craft this snazzy, you know, literate email, and really what I want are 2 sentences, 3 sentences that really just spell out the important point, and that's it. And I can make a decision based on that. So, for instance, if you're sending, you're a company, you've just received an investment, right? And it's from True Ventures. And this is True's first ed tech investment ever, or all year, or largest fintech investment ever. I mean, that's a nice little hook. That sinks in. I hope that's helpful.
So I'm going to repeat the phone call thing. I actually love phone calls, but for some reason, people tend to call me at just the wrong time. Which, you know, I'm waiting for a radio thing, and suddenly phone call, hello, and it doesn't work. So email tends to be, like everyone else, the best. I will talk about a couple of the ways where it's gone real south real quick. People have somehow gotten a hold of my text messages and tried to, hey, can you promote our latest Kickstarter? I'm like, not on my text message. You know, there are people who have tried through Twitter, and Twitter is an interesting medium, but it doesn't seem to work very well for trying to get my attention in a positive way. And then someone recently tried to get to me through Facebook through my wife. And they're like, and I was like, oh my God. And I was really, yeah, so don't use my wife. But, so that's the hard part, right, though? I mean, and I get the struggle, right? You want to somehow get my attention and rise above the other 500 emails I got that day. It's tough. I totally respect that. And, you know, I think part of it is you have to understand that there's a lot of just luck and magic that happens. That you catch me at the right time, I'm at the time that I'm writing that story, and it just all melts together. And if it doesn't happen, the 3 follow-up emails, not gonna make me happy, right? So just accept sometimes it's not gonna happen. And it's more often than not gonna not happen, right? I mean, you're talking about like a 99-to-1 success rate here.
Yeah, so that actually raises an interesting conundrum, right? Which is that the odds of success are low.
Yeah.
Persistence does not necessarily help. And it also means there's going to be a temptation to do the thing that everyone hates, which is, and the media hates, which is to essentially carpet bomb the media with pitches. And the result of that is, which I think Mark alluded to, is wildly off-target pitches. For example, I left my last journalism job just over 2 years ago, and I continue to get pitches for stories. Not only do I get to them, they come not to my Gmail account, but I get them to my PR agency email account, wanting to know when I'm going to write about their thing in Forbes. And so, like, there's a doing the hard way, which is to figure out, you know, if you were going to write a pitch to these 4 guys and you sent them all the same pitch, you're probably going to go over 4. But if you craft the pitch in a way that acknowledges and that it's clear in the pitch that you've actually taken the time to figure out what they do, make some allusion to the, you know, sometimes people don't do it very well. It's a little, sometimes it's clumsy. They allude to the last story that you wrote in a way that's a little awkward. Oh, I love that last story you did. Here's another great idea, you know, write about me. So do you guys want to talk a little bit about that, about the way that if you, like crafting the message or crafting the subject line or some tips to get people to?
Sure. Actually, when you said that, what would interest all 4 of us, my mind immediately went to what pitch would interest all 4 of us, and I was thinking, okay, it's got to be health technology, it's got to be something to do with financing, it's got to be a major trend in the industry that's going to interest a wider consumer audience, and it's got to tell a story about how you succeeded with a problem in your business.
That's a real unicorn startup there.
Yeah. So it is really important to know who you're talking to. On the negative side, My wife happens to be a physician who used to write a health blog that was in the Chronicle. She still occasionally gets PR pitches because of that. There is one particular, I won't name who they are, person, who somehow pitches my wife and me regularly on the same things, none of which have ever had anything to do with anything we would ever cover. So, that person has been put in the spam filter for us, and I suspect the spam filter for every media thing there ever is. So, definitely don't carpet bomb, don't reach out widely. In terms of what works, it is actually a very good idea to go look and read what we do. And then sit back and think about the story you're trying to tell and how you can tell your story in a way that's similar to what we've done before. Then hit me up with that, and that will probably get my attention. There are some things, we love doing stories about young, particularly for some reason young is popular, young entrepreneurs who succeed against the odds. It doesn't have to be huge success, it just has to be a clear challenge that anyone in the audience can understand and a way of solving it that anyone can relate to. Persistence, creativity, the kind of thing that any other entrepreneur can say, they beat that seemingly insurmountable thing, I can too. So that's the kind of message that would sink in with me.
I appreciate what social media can do for word of mouth, and whether that's on Twitter or other social media, or even some of these newer health accelerators. If the buzz gets started about something and all of a sudden everyone at that accelerator is talking about such and such, I will pay attention to that. So that's kind of stuff that never comes in email.
Yeah, nothing beats us learning on our own, being interested rather than you trying to get our attention.
I'd like to take us on a slightly different path, a pet peeve of mine.
While I've got you
Let's
all here.
complain.
Websites, company websites in particular, and press releases to some degree as well. But I can't tell you how many times I go to a company website looking for a basic description of what products are made, or a little history of the company. When was it founded? And I can't find the information.
Yeah.
Not that everybody does that poorly, but it's routinely you wind up on Wikipedia looking for information about your companies that's not on your website. So let me give you a quick example of something that's good. Now, we cover, for a venture capital journal, a lot of venture capital firms, and there's one called IVP, Institutional Venture Partners, and they have this little page on their website called IVP History. Institutional Venture Partners was founded by Reed Dennis in 1980. Okay, a nice little piece of data, right? IVP was the first venture firm on Sand Hill Road, blah, blah, blah. We're working out of a $1.4 billion late-stage venture capital and growth equity fund, and we managed $5.4 billion in committed capital. Now, how hard was that to write? But you're valuable. You're rushing through a story. You need just a little data on IVP. It's right there.
Well, and I would like to parrot the data thing. I oftentimes, when a new app is trying to get my attention, I'm like, okay, what's your MAU, DAU? And they're like, well, we're private. We don't have to tell you. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't have to talk to you either. And so the trying to play the game of, we're going to keep the kimono closed. If you want to talk to the press and keep stuff private, you have every right to, but guess what? It's not going to go very far. And being able, when my reporters come to me with a story, or if I go to my editor with a story, I have compelling data that helps to tell the story. One of my greatest examples is when I was working for the Wall Street Journal. I was one of the first people at the national level to write about Twitch. I don't know if you know what Twitch is, but it's this game streaming platform. Amazon bought it. So the thing that made them really get it, right? My editors, I tried a couple times. What got them to get it was that I took the last kind of big competition that had happened on Twitch. And it was the championships for League of Legends, which is one of these big games. And I took how many people watched it, and then I figured out how many people did it take to add up to that who had watched. It was more than the people who had watched the season finales or the series finales of The Sopranos, 24, and Breaking Bad combined. That's what I wrote in my pitch to my editors. And they're like, oh my gosh, we got to write about this, right? That actually was a quote that was then parroted by CNN and NPR and a bunch of other people, right? So compelling data makes all the difference. And you have to be able to tell that story that way. And I mean, all the press is moving toward business journalism, right? I mean, I think that's pretty clear. Everyone's starting to think in terms of data. How do I tell this story in a larger context? And if you can't answer that question, you're not going to get very far.
Yeah, and if that requires you to invent some new metrics or figure out some way to tell the story that's different, that's going to be compelling, then,
but also
then you have to do that.
industry standard metrics are
Yes.
important too, right? If you're a messaging startup and you don't want to tell me your MAU, there's probably a reason, right? So that's stuff I'm going to pick up on quick.
Well, I just want to add one quick thing to Mark's point about terrible websites, which is because it is a real problem. Because you'll do this exercise where you kind of go to the website and the first thing you're looking for is, oh well, who's the contact? Who can I call? Or at least who can I email? And there's no phone number. There may not even be like an about line that shows where the company is, so I can't easily even look up the phone number. And it's also lacking in information about the management team. So I want, at a base level, if your website is missing contact information, to Mark's point, some history of what the company is and what the products do and who's running the show. And if you've raised capital and it's been disclosed, well, by all means, include that somewhere too. Because to Mark's point, if you can't find it, you're going to just sort of assume there's something likely wrong. There's a lot of other options other than to write about you, and I'll go find something that's a little bit easier to get to. And it's just basic blocking and tackling that goes beyond sort of how to pitch. I do want to raise one other kind of set of questions, which is to give people a little bit of sense of, well, what does kind of get your attention? So just these are a few sample kinds of story pitches that you see all the time. So for example, we've hired a new executive. We have a new VP of marketing. Who wants to write about my new VP of marketing? Nobody. Okay, see, so don't issue the new VP of marketing press release. Now, there are exceptions to that, right? So the exception would be there's something about this guy who's particularly compelling. He used to be the CEO of Microsoft or something. Like there's
Bill
some.
Gates?
That's a get.
He's won. That would be a good get. That's my point. He won. Maybe it's something else. Maybe he won a gold medal in the Olympics. There's got to be some. If there's not some compelling, extraordinary element to you've hired a new executive, write a blog
I'm going
post.
to jump in and just say, even when there is some compelling thing, it might be a bad idea. If you think back to will.i.am becoming the ambassador for Intel, most of the stories about that were not particularly positive. They were making fun of the decision.
Right.
So, don't
Think it through.
Think it through.
Right. So how about I have launched a new product. Are you going to write about my launch day? To me,
Depends on who you are.
well,
right?
you've never heard of me before.
If I've never heard about you, that's a little tougher. But if I can answer, there's this graph we all call the nut graph. If you don't know what it is, go Google it. It is the why do I care, right? And it's not the history, it's the why do I care. And for us, it has to be like New York Times level wide, right? Really understanding the why do I care and explaining it to a normal person. If you can't do that across the Thanksgiving table, too bad.
So how about I've raised a new round of financing. Mark, are you going to write about my new financing round?
Yeah, we do, and let me elaborate a little bit because there's different degrees of it, and that's an important distinction. So we do try and cover the waterfront on new financings, and because of the volume, we obviously can't devote a lot of time to each one. So routine financings are posted.
I raised my seed round.
A C or a seed?
Seed round. I raised like $500,000.
Yeah, a seed can get in there. I mean, we like to put up as many as possible. Now, to break it out into something a little bit more substantial, there has to be a good reason for it. It has to be particularly novel or particularly large. Nowadays, we talk a lot about valuation, so you just received a $41 trillion valuation. That would catch our attention too.
That would get anyone's attention.
The first $41 trillion valuation.
Can I take a crack at this?
Yeah.
Normally, we wouldn't write about such investments, but given who we are, if it's a health system and they're taking an equity investment in your startup, that can be quite interesting. It could even indicate a trend because we're seeing a lot of health systems take positions in startups these days, and even a few launching some of their own. So,
because that actually gets to my next example, which is we've got a new partnership with a big company that is going to distribute our product or help us sell our product. Or does that get your attention? No, bless Mark.
It might for me. We did a story on a couple of graduates from UC Davis who came up with an idea. For those of you who are actual residents of Northern California and just spent some time in college systems here, it's a popular, tubing on the North California rivers is a pretty popular college activity. And it's become very social and there are big events around it. And they come up with an idea for interlocking floaties to make rafts. And they kind of made some preliminary designs, went over to China to get them manufactured. And they came to us when they got a deal to get them distributed in Big Five and Costco and somewhere else. We weren't interested in the distribution bit at all, but we were interested in the story of their journey from being in college and loving the kind of floating down the river lifestyle to this product and how it became a success. Because they were picked up by all three of those outlets and they sold like 5 million units in the first year or something. That kind of story is great because business owners want to hear about stuff like that. It's like, okay, I can see the progression and the kind of things they did there. That gives me ideas. It gives me hope. So.
Nice. So before let me just stop for a second and see if we've got any questions from the audience. It's a little hard to see from out there. But if you do, I think we have a mic somewhere floating around. We have a mic somewhere?
There's a guy way at the back.
A guy way in the back?
Yep.
No
Yes,
pictures.
guy way in the back.
Two people way at the back.
The guy in the aisle over there?
Just have him shout for the moment. Oh,
Yes,
there.
you. Oh, yeah. Rise.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. So you guys are the experts, right, in the industry and what you're doing.
Well, we pretend to be.
Good job so far. So my question is, it's very quick. If you had to give 2 to 3 trends that you think are key right now, what would it be?
I think that's different for every one of us because of the beats
Why don't
we
we do
cover.
Two or
One-
three
one- maybe one
trends
each.
in
Yeah.
what? Just in startups, in
One big trend in venture capital is that there are these huge unicorn rounds where people are piling big money into promising later stage companies with huge valuations. There's a trend.
For me, trends are crowdfunding as a funding source, both Kickstarter type crowdfunding and the new stuff that's coming with equity crowdfunding, which no one really understands and knows quite where it's going to go. That's a fairly big trend. Another trend which is somewhat related, is actually people trying to stay away from funding rounds as long as possible.
Scott?
wearables for health, hacking your health. You're going to hear a lot more about that. And also just the explosion of data that kind of results from that and a lot of other courses and how that's going to bend the cost curve of healthcare in this country.
And in the consumer world, I would say probably consolidation. I mean, Apple and Google are basically trying to build everything in Facebook, right? And so all of these startups now that we're encountering are the ones who are trying to fill in the little holes where they haven't done it. And then people like Pebble just, the Apple Watch comes along, it's like, oh, okay. And so that's one of the interesting trends to us, is that it's constantly people trying to find a way to relate to consumers but not get stepped on.
Great. Thanks.
Hello. So my question pertains to, not necessarily only the consumer goods, but also for healthcare that's kind of not stealth, but are more engineer focused. So they were primarily focused on, the quality going through not just FDA, but different type of ISO regulations that, companies have like over 40 patents that are really pushing out things that are, I guess, useful in hospitals that they don't necessarily focus on going to the editors, but they could really get a lot of benefits from them. How do you guys see yourselves kind of disrupting that market with making sure they know it's important to kind of come to you to let them know that there's these types of innovations that are extremely important? I mean, I work with a lot of different types of medical device companies, and they don't think marketing or advertisements when they're really pushing out a lot of great products like Minerva, Medtronic, former Surgerexes. Do you see yourselves pivoting to make sure they feel themselves a little bit more welcoming in that type of atmosphere and less kind of the engineer kind of closed-minded, like, oh, I don't know, what if they shut me out kind of personality?
Take that?
Scott,
Well, the two main things I tend to write are case studies, which take the form of cover stories and magazine stories, and I write a weekly column. That's where I get to be more, let's mix things up, let's talk about disruptions and that kind of thing. So I like to think that I've got a dialogue going, a conversation really with my readers about one thing leading to another. So I might write a column one week on patient safety, and the next we're talking about some things that branch off of that. So there are vehicles and ways for that to become a real conversation between a community of our readers.
I want to hijack the idea for a second. Broadly speaking, not just healthcare, there are a number of startup people, Marco Arment, not startup, but bloggers, Marco Arment and Daring Fireball, I forgot his name, John Gruber, who've done studies on how successful apps are after they get a ton of press. Right, so I want to bring up this idea of how good is it, really, how helpful are we, right, in your business, hoping to get the revenue up and to the right? And what they found is that a crazy amount of press, right? Let's call it the greatest day you've had. It's literally like this, and then it's back to normal. So, okay, we can do a lot of damage, right? Your app sucks, it's got privacy problems, all this, you are out of the game. But if you get a ton of really good coverage, there's not a guarantee that it's actually going to keep your business doing really well. So what do you want, right? And sometimes I think people are coming to us and like, this is the magical answer. We are going to make your business work. I'm sorry, most of the state data says we're not. Press doesn't do that much for you. So you have to think about that. Now, medical is different, right? Because you're getting into the minds of doctors and everything. But for the larger world, it's not always the case.
Yeah, I think the one thing I would add to that is you can't communicate your way out of trouble.
No.
Right? So if no one's buying your product, you can't PR your way to success, I don't think. As much as I would like to think it, because we would have an even better business. Take the next one. Thanks. I think we've got time for, what, 2 more? Maybe 2 more.
So my question is how to generate interest in a product that's in a very, very specific niche market but has broader implications. And my company specifically schedules residency interviews for people applying out of medical school, which is actually a major problem in medicine, and $400 million is wasted in it each year. And it started...
That's how you do it. You just told us.
Yeah.
$400 million wasted every year in medical school affects the number of people becoming physicians in the United States, affects healthcare 20 years from now.
GME budget cuts, and this is a better way.
The physician shortages are headline news every day.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what you do. You have to. One of the things I was going to say is, for a lot of people, you're taking a step back and looking at what problem is it that you're solving, that you're addressing. I don't want to talk about your product, actually. The fact of the matter is most journalists don't want to talk about products. That's like doing product reviews. It's not very interesting. What we do want to talk about is solving people's problems, making things better, or the flip side, what a disaster you've caused everyone.
Well, then I think I have some solutions to some problems then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's great.
Hey, what's up, Scott? Hey, so I got a question. There's a concept as a PR strategy, newsjacking. So, for example, for the audience, on a national level, Senator Ted Cruz, he's running for president. It's now widely known that he has dual citizenship in Canada and the United States, because I believe his dad is from Canada. And so if you say we're an immigration attorney and you said, hey, we're going to do a sale on T1 visas to take advantage of the national press that's being generated for your own use, how receptive are you guys to the concept of newsjacking? Thank you.
I think I described earlier how the security industry tends to do this, right? They will, latest hack of, Sony, oh, I have an opinion, right? Oftentimes, again, as we've described, we're always trying to tell kind of trender stories, right? So if you're just kind of a person who's just bloviating, I am far less interested, right? But if you are someone who's actually got meat in the game and, you actually have some, you show that you're part of this, right? In terms of hacking, like you're not some guy who's in a chair just saying, well, it probably wasn't North Korea, but you actually know, then I'm gonna care, right? Or you've worked with the government on these types of things before. But that's the struggle for me, is oftentimes finding the difference between people basically just blowing off their mouths and people who actually know something.
Yeah, I think it's a good strategy. What I wouldn't do, though, is the thing which I think lots of reporters have seen before, which is, wow, you just did a great story on Pepsi. Would you like to do a great story on Coke now? Well, no, you're a little late. Bad strategy. We'll take one last one.
Okay, hi. I'm coming from Bolivia, so I'm going to take my shot. This was a long journey. So you were talking that it's very difficult to get messages from people that want to communicate with you. So what do you think if we bridge if we shorten this bridge between journalists and between entrepreneurs? If there is a way that you would just one look that would take you less than 5 minutes, you would know, okay, this entrepreneur and this startup is relevant to what I write as a journalist and to what I write as a person, has a vision that I'm looking for to communicate, and has the background that I am looking for. So it's a symbol, a number that it will take you 5 minutes. Do you think, I think 5 seconds, do you think this is something that will help you to communicate?
Are you talking about like a rating?
I think he's asking how, essentially how long has he got to sell you on the story?
How long does it take my finger to travel to the delete button?
Yeah.
As I mentioned a little earlier, things that resonate with me are pretty short, a couple sentences, and you got to get to the heart of the matter. We just raised a $35 million round, and this is the first product that does cloud management services. Now I understand what you're talking about. At least you've given me that. Does that help?
The guy who just came up about the residency thing, he actually did a really great example. That was very close to being as good as he could get that story, which was, this is a $400 million problem for a group of people we all know and understand. He didn't, he could have said, we have a scheduling application, it solves these problems with scheduling for medical residents, blah, blah, blah. I fell asleep already. So that a lot of it is, the secret is you do only have 5 seconds, by the way, realistically, is thinking about what you can say in 5 seconds that's true and relevant, and will get them to listen further.
Yeah.
And that's really what it boils down to.
It's the elevator pitch. Journalists all have ADD. So keep it tight. Yeah, worse than that. And I think we are just about out of time. Thank you guys very much.